Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another live forum that we're doing online on Facebook and YouTube. These have proven fairly successful over the last couple of weeks, and we've had a lot of feedback from people saying how much they appreciate us reaching out via the online channels. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to mix it up a little bit. We've previously done these in a lunchtime hour to try and allow people to tune in during their downtime in the middle of the day. But we thought we'd try something a little bit different this week, a midweek Wednesday evening. So while people are sitting down to dinner or waiting for their dinner to cook in the background, we thought we'd pop into people's lounge rooms and say hello. We've got a few things to talk about tonight, the obvious one being coronavirus, what's happening as the relaxations come in on the restrictions around movement and the activities that we can engage in. We'll talk about the usual topics. We've got an update on Sport Pilot magazine. We'll talk about the weight increase, part 149, and so on and so forth. And we'll probably finish up with a quick chat around about our board nominations and the election that'll be coming up in a couple of months later this year. I've got Michael with me. Obviously, everyone can see him. So, g'day, Michael.
G'day, Mick.
Did you want to add anything to that introduction?
No, I think they're the key topics that people seem to be asking us about all the times, and they're the things that we're busying ourselves. Obviously, the easing of restrictions is something that's on everyone's lips, and can they go flying, and what's happening with our flying schools. So that's a very important thing to talk about tonight, and all the other topics you mentioned are all key things that everyone's working on still.
That's good. So let's start with coronavirus then. So as everyone's aware, the coronavirus restrictions on movement are starting to relax. The only state that's really still constraining movements in a heavy way is Queensland. They've still got cross-border movement restrictions. We've got a webpage. It's just popped up on the screen where all of the state-based regulations and restrictions are listed. Just before the live stream kicked off, I checked on the Tasmanian restrictions. They were the last state holding out on recreational flying, and it appears at the moment that they've relaxed that constraint, and they're now talking about some recreational activities being permitted, and that will include, of course, recreational flying. Flying training has been permitted for some time now. But it now appears that Tasmania is the last state to single out flying as a restricted activity, has now changed their tact and relaxed that constraint. Please be aware, everyone, these COVID-19 restrictions are not, we haven't returned to a business as usual scenario. There are still restrictions in place. So whilst flying is permitted, we urge everyone to check on the state-based regulations and the current conditions in place, depending on where you're engaging in these activities. There are still restrictions in place, but we can now go flying, which is a great thing. I'd also urge people to consider returning to flying. If you have been away for a period of time, please go and see an instructor or find someone who's got a little bit more recency than you. Take them flying. Take the opportunity to socialise in a COVID-19 safe manner, of course, but take that opportunity to catch up with a fellow pilot or an instructor and refresh your flying skills. I know I actually went flying for the first time in ages this week, just in the week just gone by, and I did exactly that. I took the opportunity to go out flying with somebody else, just to make sure that they picked me up on the rusty spots that I had. Not only was it great to get out flying, but it was also good to share that experience with another aviator. We have got people returning to the office in the near future, if not already. So I might just hand over to you, Michael, to talk about that just quickly.
Yeah, we're excuse me. We're progressively looking at a return to the office over the next month, 6 weeks. We're following the ACT government's guidelines in terms of their COVID safe 3-phase approach. Currently, the ACT is at phase 2.1, which means still working from home. But once phase 2.2 comes and then phase 3, we'll start getting people back in the office. But as an example, I was in the office today with a couple of staff. We're working on our 149 paperwork for CASA, and a number of us are in the office today working on that. So at this stage, it's ad hoc meetings and ad hoc get-togethers in the office as needed. But progressively, as we get to the end of June and more into July, people will be returning to the office. And we're developing documents, as Mick said, not only for our staff to ensure that we provide a COVID-safe workplace, but we also developed and shared a lot of resources with our schools last week in terms of how to operate a flight training school in a COVID-safe environment. So one of the requirements that Safe Work Australia has set out anywhere in a workplace or anywhere where you're conducting a business is you need some COVID-safe strategies or COVID-safe policies in place. And we've provided a lot of ideas and a lot of background information to our schools in that place to allow them to return to normal operations, but normal operations in a safe way that look at, maintaining hygiene in and around the plane, hygiene in and around classrooms and training rooms and briefing rooms, and also the equipment and the touch points on an aircraft that you use. So if you're a CFI and you're watching tonight and you haven't got that information, contact our office. We can resend it and share that with you. We're also developing a comprehensive guide for our members that will be published in the next couple of weeks, which will go to all members around a COVID-safe environment and flight operations in that space.
Great news. Where can people find that information? Once we've released that, where will that information be made available?
For our CFIs, it's in our CFI portal. So any CFI has access to our CFI portal. They can log in with their details there, and all that information is available. And for our members, it's in our news section or in the members portal in the news section. And we'll also be publishing it on our COVID-19 webpage with links from that webpage to get access to all that information. And we're also looking at including some information in the first edition of Sport Pilot. So as we talk a little bit more about Sport Pilot a bit later, we can cover what's going to be included in Sport Pilot. But we're exploring putting a detailed guide, a COVID-safe guide, in Sport Pilot magazine.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. We've had a comment from Roger Hall asking about the Australian border, and I feel like I've got a little bit of echo here, and I'm not sure if it's my. So I apologise if everyone is hearing that. The South Australian border, cross-border movements between certain states are still limited. I know that there's some restrictions in place in WA as well. I'm not exactly familiar with the South Australian border. I do also know that the Queensland border, you need a permit to cross that border at the moment as well. For those reasons, again, I refer back to our webpage where we link to the various state restrictions. Whilst flying within a state is currently permitted everywhere that that we're aware of, as listed on our page, which has just popped up on screen. Some cross-border movements are still restricted, and for some activities you still need a permit, and you can work with your local, I believe the local police force in most cases is helping to facilitate those cross-border movements in a legal way. Specifically on the South Australian border, I don't know what the requirements are. But certainly for all our members within South Australia or within the neighbouring states, if you're just flying and not actually crossing the border and landing interstate, then those activities are permitted. I'm sorry I can't add more information than that, but please, Roger, feel free to jump on our website on the link that's provided on screen at the moment, and and yeah, there should be some more information there. And Meret has just dug out the South Australian restrictions specifically, so hopefully that will help shine some light on that question for you. Something else we've been working on just in recent days is Part 149. So a lot of people will be aware we're moving from our current exemption-based model. So for those who don't know, the way that RAAus operates is through a series of exemptions, and we're working with CASA to change that model, and instead of working from exemptions, have specific regulations that govern how we conduct our activities and the types of activities that we can conduct. And the first step in that is what we call Part 149. So it's part of the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations. Without going into deep detail, what it means is it gives us a little bit more flexibility and freedom going forward. It strengthens the relationship between RAAus and CASA instead of it being a a quasi relationship between RAAus and the member and CASA. So it changes the convoluted route, creates a relationship between RAAus and the member, and allows us to administer those activities in a sense on behalf of CASA. The other thing it does is it removes a lot of ambiguity in some of the activities and some of the liabilities that actually apply to members. So, for example, if you operated an aircraft in contravention of your intention, and that's what's known as a strict liability offence, and that means our member would be liable. What Part 149 does, it allows us to actually any deficiencies or any breaches of the regulations, and instead of CASA coming down on people, it allows us to address those, and we'll take our usual education versus regulation type approach to those matters. Michael, did you want to give us a quick update about some of the movements in terms of the admin team in the office, the management team in the office, and some of the things that have happened with the exposition in the last couple of days?
Yeah, well, we had a meeting with CASA last week. So as members would know, we submitted our application to CASA in November 2019, and CASA said it'd take 2 or 3 months to do an initial assessment before they came back to us. We did have an original workshop planned in March, but as a result of COVID-19, a lot of things got deferred and put on hold for a couple of months. That period is now easing, and we're starting to work with CASA again. So we had a fairly lengthy conversation with CASA on Friday last week, a Zoom meeting with 3 or 4 representatives from CASA and 3 or 4 people from RAAus, and we worked through the first tranche, or the first part of the exposition, which is the organisational structure, the corporate structure of RAAus, some of the things that our staff do, the qualifications and experience of our staff. So a whole range of requirements that RAAus needs to meet there, which we meet, no problems at all. It's articulating that and putting that into a document that demonstrates to CASA and the regulator going forward that RAAus continues to have the ability to do everything that we say we're going to do, which we've never had to do in the past. So it was a really good exercise working with CASA through that. We came through, I think CASA assessed 90 or 100 points in our document. There's an overall about 180 points that CASA need to sign off on. It's a bit like an audit. And once they get satisfaction that 180 factors have been addressed, well, then they'll issue the 149 certificate. So of the 90 that CASA signed off on the last Friday, there was 8, 10 or 12 that we needed to just do a little bit more work on. And that's what the team's been doing over the last couple of days, just putting some tweaks to a couple of pieces here and there. And then we work with CASA again Friday next week. Is the next scheduled time that we're sitting down with CASA. And we'll just continue to work every couple of weeks on this. But we expect in 6-8 weeks, perhaps, we'll finalise this work, and CASA will issue the 149 certificate, just as they issued the 149 certificate to the APF. So the Australian Parachuting Federation, their process was about the same. They were a couple of months ahead of us, and we expect that timeline to be the same over the next couple of months.
And it's a good point. A lot of people don't actually understand how closely we work with some of the other organisations. We've got very tight ties with the APF. We've been sharing our experiences with our Part 149 transition, and they've been sharing theirs. We've been swapping and exchanging documentation, some of the structure of our approach to the exposition, and so on and so forth. And similarly, we quite often interact with the GFA, the Hang Gliding Federation, or SAFA now as they're called, and so on and so forth. So that's something a lot of people don't actually realise in the background. So I know this sounds or it looks a little bit contrived, but did you want to, for those who don't know, do you want to just talk about like how often we interact with those guys, especially the APF and SAFA, and just talk about some of those interactions, especially on the safety front that we do?
Well, yeah, the safety front is key with SAFA. We have similar operations to SAFA in the hang gliding world and the powered parachute world and things like that. APF, our operations are different. So our relationship with both of those organisations is good, but it's a different relationship. We talk about safety, documentation and safety systems, and we actually recently shared our complaints handling framework with the APF. and they've adopted a very similar process to the one that RAAus recently introduced, and they share their safety management system with us and their whole range of policy with us. So it's a really positive two-way street that we have with a number of these organisations. With SAFA, we've got a memorandum of understanding in place, so we recognise certain things at SAFA, and SAFA will recognise certain authorisations and endorsements at RAAus, because we do very similar things, and it seems silly from time to time forcing someone to go and get the same accreditation from multiple organisations. If organisations can recognise those across boundaries, it makes for a smoother, more meaningful experience for people, rather than having to go to 5 organisations to get the same endorsement 5 times. Why not go to one and have that recognised across the board? So that's the type of relationship we have, with ongoing good working relationship with Warbirds and the balloonists and the GFA. Of course, we're in constant contact with them, but it's probably a weekly conversation with each one that we have. During COVID-19, RAAus set up a couple of phone meetings with each of the organisations to see how they're going, and we've shared a lot of our information. And the Model Aircraft Association of Australia actually copied and pasted a lot of the RAAus material on COVID-19 and shared with their members, and that was really positive interaction that we had with the model aircraft guys. So they've been doing a great job sharing information out. They've probably been the most dramatically affected by COVID-19. They had a couple of world championships planned, and none of their members could travel overseas to enter these world championships of model aircraft. So they've been pretty much grounded for the last 2 or 3 months, which is disappointing for them. But we're valuable, important relationships, Mick, and I think that's the key thing, that everybody understands each other's business, and we work together on things that we can work on and improve aviation where we can collectively.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm just reading the online comments. So Christopher Smith has just said, "Good work, guys." Thanks, Chris. I've seen a couple of your videos online. You've gone live a little bit lately, Chris, and I've had a little pop up on my phone saying that you've gone live, and I've enjoyed your video. So keep that going, and anything you want to share with us, yeah, that'd be great. We'd like to share that out as well. Bernie from Lethbridge. G'day, Bernie. It's been a long time since I've spoken to you, but I remember catching up last time we were down there, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up sometime soon. You've just put I think that's a typo. You've just corrected it. 2 more at Lethbridge Air Park. I think that was in reference to something either I said or Michael said. Not sure what that refers to. If you'd like to give us a bit more guidance on what we're talking about when you put that up, yeah, we might be able to elaborate on that a little bit more. Currently, we've got around about 40 people tuned in online. The comments are a little bit quiet at the moment. So if some of you people out there that are tuned in, if you've got some questions, these forums are intended for question and answers. It's a good opportunity for us to engage with members. These are our way of staying in touch with members during these movement restrictions. Prior to COVID and hopefully post-COVID, we'll return to these activities in terms of getting around to airports and actually meeting people face to face. But I think we'll also continue these online forums. I think they're a good way to interact at fairly low cost and to a broader range of the or broader cohort of the membership that couldn't otherwise make it to airfields. But feel free, jump in, comment, ask us questions. You're probably looking on the screen, looking around. I've got a couple of screens running here just so I can keep an eye on things. But jump in. If you've got any questions, feel free. At the moment, we've got a couple more topics that I've got lined up to talk about, one being the weight increase, and we'll finish off with the board nominations. But there's probably only about 10 minutes of us waffling on about that. So please jump in. Oh, and there's Phil. He's, the weight increase. So jump in and feel free to ask some questions. So the weight increase, this is one that's kind of frustrating me at the moment. I think the COVID-19 stuff has sort of delayed this, and same with the controlled airspace endorsement that Jamie's just written up. We'll talk about these separately. So sorry, Moret, I've probably just confused it. We'll go back to Phil's comment. The weight increase. We have basically got no updates since the last time we spoke online or through these forums. Unfortunately, we're still in the same spot. We're waiting for some progress from CASA. Basically where it's at is CASA has, in principle, said they're supportive of the weight increase. The industry and individual participants like us, pilots and aircraft owners, have come out and overwhelmingly supported getting a weight increase for RAAus. We think that's a really, really positive thing. At the moment, CASA is taking a look at the stall speed. We initially proposed to go up to 760 kilos with no reference to the stall speed. CASA is now saying, well, we think there should be a stall speed. They're looking at the 45 knots. We feel that that's not appropriate. Our take on it is that many of the aircraft that are going to come onto the RAAus register are already being flown in Australia. They will continue to be flown by the same pilots. Those pilots are already RAAus members or are thinking about coming across to RAAus. But it's not like there's going to be new aircraft or new pilots flying those aircraft. They're already accepted in Australia. They're already built to a standard. Those design standards, it doesn't matter whether they're LSA standards or something else, those standards are accepted by CASA. And we feel if aeronautical engineers and designers, etc., have built the aircraft, designed the aircraft, etc., to operate at a certain speed and a certain weight, and those speeds and weights fall into our category, then they should be safe to continue operating on our register. So we're going to be having some good, long, hard conversations with CASA to say we don't think it's appropriate that you keep that stall speed in place. And certainly if we look at people crossing over from RAAus into RPL, they're essentially operating on the same training, in many cases in the same aircraft, but where they are operating heavier aircraft, those aircraft are constrained by the 45 knot stall speed. And for that reason, we don't think it's appropriate either. Did you want to add anything on the process behind that, Michael?
It's just frustrating, Mick. Obviously, COVID has slowed the process down. CASA have given us an August date that they'll have an update to us. So we're in June now. So hopefully in the next 6 or 7 weeks, we get a further update from CASA. And we raise it every time we talk to CASA. But your summary is great there. This new weight category for RLs, new aircraft aren't going to materialise that we haven't seen before that end up in this weight category. It's existing aircraft, that existing flight operations with existing pilots and existing maintainers. The only change is a set of VH on the side. These people will be given a choice between VH and an RAAus registration. So it's about providing choice in the marketplace, choice for people to get involved. So we don't think there's a lot of sustenance in CASA holding out on a stall speed, because the stall speeds are there. The envelopes of these aircraft have already been developed. They've been operating for years and years and years. We just got to work through, a painstaking process with the regulator. It's their job to provide safe skies to everyone in Australia. We can't force that or hurry that up. We've got to just work through the process. But our level of frustration increases every week. We don't get further updates from CASA in this space. And I'm sure the level of frustration of our members, and we feel the frustration from our members, of all the forums we've done. I think this is our 6th forum that we've done since the end of March. MTO is the one theme that's run through every one of those forums. So CASA should be getting the message that this is something our members want. This is something the aviation community wants. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, and I want to stress that it is frustrating. We share the frustration that members have, but we don't believe in beating CASA up. We believe in taking a good, responsible and respectful approach to them. And when we're presented with these hurdles, what we're going to do is we're going to argue against them based on some good, sound, rational reasoning. So please, I don't want anyone to take our comments tonight about the frustration, which I think we all equally share, as being a targeted attack on CASA, because it's not. Just by way of example, we I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I took a look at the Tasmanian restrictions on recreational flying. Earlier this week, I spoke to Shane Carmody from CASA. He's, for those who don't know, he's a Director of Aviation Safety and CEO of CASA. And we collectively reached out, RAAus and CASA reached out to Tasmania and asked them to relax their constraints on recreational flying. Now, whilst we haven't had a direct response back and we can't claim a victory in that space, and we're not about to claim a win when it's not appropriate, what we can say is that there's no more references to recreational flying on the Tasmanian website. That is, it appears to be allowed now. And and I can only say that having a good, respectful, above-the-belt approach to tackling these problems collectively with CASA has allowed us to make that joint approach. So, and we're going to continue that. Bernie, you've just asked about the possible weight increase and RAAus manufacturers responding by indicating that they may build to a new weight limit. It's an interesting question, and it's multifaceted. Firstly, there's things going on internationally on a global level around the light sport aircraft standards, which are drafted by the ASTM, an organisation in the US. They're looking at taking a completely different approach to the design and certification of aircraft, or more to the point, the design. And they're moving away from hard weight limits to, it appears to be what they're tending towards is what they're calling a performance index. And that's going to be a combination of weight, horsepower in engines, wing loading, so on and so forth. And they're even considering more passengers. So there's global movements to an increased weight on that front. We've also got manufacturers like Jabiru who already have aircraft which are capable of operating up to, I think the Jabiru 230 is a 750 kilo weight limit. Those aircraft are already operating on our register today. They have to operate at a lower limit to meet our 600 kilo paper constraint. And they also have to operate at that low limit to meet the 45 knot stall speed. Those aircraft would be able to take advantage of the increased weight. And then, of course, we've got a whole bunch of amateur-built aircraft. I think the RV3 and possibly the RV4, off the top of my head, are two of those aircraft which would be eligible to be on our register and operate at either their full weight or near their full weight. So there's a number of movements. I don't think anyone specifically come to us and said, we'd like to change our designs in response to what you're achieving. But something that has been made clear to us is that people are holding off on purchasing aircraft because they want to take advantage of this. So in some ways, the delay in approving this weight increase has actually disadvantaged some people because these are the people who aren't making investment decisions based on uncertainty. So I suspect that once we get the weight increase, and I'm confident we will get it, it's just going to be a process that we've got to go through. But once we get that, I'm confident that people will respond and they will take advantage of it. Ross Costanzo, I think I've just answered your question, the LSA weight increase. I didn't actually see your question until just then. But with respect to the weight increase, as I said before, the ASTM organisation who sets those LSA standards is addressing some of those questions about changing weights and moving to a performance index versus a hard weight limit. So that's a pretty exciting space, and it's one that I'm watching fairly closely. And I'm hoping that probably in the next 2 years or so, we'll see movement coming out of the ASTM organisation in a positive way. And I'm sure once that happens, we're going to see a raft of new aircraft designs and models come out. Mark Sullivan, g'day. How are you? Phil Yates, finding the noisiest RAAus angry people about anything RAAus fail to even appear at these forums. I'll leave that one untouched. I'll leave that one to you to discuss, Phil. Got another question from Roger. Disclosure of personal details to third parties, a requirement by law. or did RAAus make that decision perhaps because of pressures brought to bear? In some respects, it is a requirement by law. We do have to maintain a register, and we've got to make that register available to certain parties for certain purposes. That's not the general public. I'm not aware of any requirement to release any personal details to the general public under any laws. But it's interesting to note the second part of your question, RAAus, did we make that decision perhaps because of pressures brought to bear? And I guess the short answer is yes. And Michael, you might want to weigh in on this after I finish. We've actually had a couple of challenges to this brought to in front of the Privacy Commissioner, and we were found to have done no wrong in that space. However, I think it's important to explain why we've done this, and it is largely because of the pressures that we face. We found a number of things. A number of other organisations were criticising RAAus for not being responsible aviators. They were criticising us for not paying landing fees and avoiding certain airport charges. And we were also facing pressures, not just from airports, but other aviators saying that part of the reason that airports are struggling is because RAAus weren't acting as a responsible cohort of aviators and not paying their way. We thought that was quite important to address, and the board made a collective decision to say that if we operate in these environments, then it's only fair that we pay our way. And the logic we applied was if you go to a Westfield car park and it costs you $2 to park, or in some cases $10 or more, you don't go in, rack up $10 or $20 worth of charges over a few hours and then break the boom gate off and drive out. What you do is, if you don't like those charges, you don't go there in the first place. In some cases, you may not realise the charges apply, but you still pay them reluctantly, and then you move on. And that's the approach that we've taken here, is to say that if we do fly into these airports, because of some of the criticisms that we've received, because some airports were refusing access to RAAus aircraft without prior notification, we chose to come up with an agreement with some of the airports, those airports being the members of the Australian Airports Association, and make those details available. We've got some pretty strict controls on that, and some pretty strict conditions around the use of that information. And we've actually been notified by a couple of members out of something like, I think it's around about 8,000 movements. And I might get this number wrong, so I'll defer to Michael if I have. We've only had literally two or three instances where we've become aware that airports are improperly using this information, and we've addressed those with those airports concerned. So we think it's been fairly successful, and by and large, I think RAAus members have responded to it pretty positively, in the sense that we do, as a collective movement, agree that we should treat airports with the respect. And if we don't like their charges, we simply won't go there. That's certainly my call. I feel that if someone's charging me $35 to do a landing, I'm going to avoid that airport like the plague. So did you want to add to that, Michael?
I think you've covered it all there, Mick. And I think the two key points here are, was there pressure brought to bear? And did we do anything wrong, or have we done anything wrong? And as you said, yeah, we're getting pressure from CASA-registered pilots, aircraft operating in CASA-spage VH aircraft, airfields, maintainers, whole range of people saying, hang on a sec, RAAus is on a free run here. Your pilots are flying wherever they like, landing in any airport they like, and not paying their way. So there was significant pressure there. So we responded to the aviation community. We didn't respond to pressure from CASA or pressure from the government or pressure from anybody else. We responded to the aviation community, and that's what we do as a member-based organisation. We've got to respond to our community first and foremost. Secondly, we don't do things wrong. We regulate 10,000 members, or we assist with the administration of 10,000 members. We have 3,500 aircraft on our books. We are a mature, sophisticated business operation, and members who have complained all the way up to the Office of the Information Commissioner, which is the old Privacy Commission. We've been found to have done no wrong. We've produced the policy, we've made the changes, we've entered into agreements with the people in appropriate manners, exercising the authority of the board and the authority of the chief executive and the staff to do the right thing by our members. And we accepted that some members won't like this, without a doubt. Some members don't like the weight increase. Some members don't like that we're going 149 compliant. Some members don't like that they didn't used to get sport part and now we're getting it for free again. So we're not going to keep all our members happy all the time, but we've got a responsibility to discharge our responsibilities within our community appropriately. And I think that's exactly what we've done with this arrangement.
And Bernie's noted that his RV8 is he generally gets $20 charge for under 1,000 kilos. He feels that's fairly reasonable, and so do I, for that matter. For the most part, I think people try and do the right thing, and this is just another one of those scenarios where we do it. Andrew Geralt, I hope I've said your name right. We've got the question again for the CTA endorsement, and Maresh just flashed it up on the screen from Jamie, the original question. So we'll move on to controlled airspace. The controlled airspace endorsement is something that is still moving ahead. We've done it a little bit differently to our original plan. It was a few years back when the then CEO and DAS of CASA said to tackle the controlled airspace and our weight increase in parallel. So we put those two proposals to CASA at once. Since then, there's been a change in the management at CASA, and they've asked us to reprioritise that and choose. So we chose weight over controlled airspace. Our logic there being that an RAAus pilot can go and get their RPL and still operate their RAAus aircraft in controlled airspace. It is somewhat limiting, but there is a pathway. Whereas for RAAus pilots, there was almost an ultimatum in terms of weight. So we chose the weight. Having said that, we have got certain schools operating in controlled airspace. A couple of examples being here in Canberra, where I'm based, there's a school now. We've got one down in Parafield in South Australia and a couple of others around the country. Anyone who trains at those schools is now allowed to operate within that environment post-certificate issue, whereas that was not previously the case. We'll be working hard to address that over the coming years. Once we've got the weight increase, we'll refocus our efforts on that controlled airspace, go back, revisit that, and further those privileges for those pilots who wish to exercise that. Anything to add to that, Michael? I think that one's a fairly
it's basically on the back burner until some other things happen. But it's still one of our major focuses. It's one of the major focuses of the board. But at this stage, CASA's priority is MTO 149. And once those things are done, there's also lots of regulatory reform in the background. But as you said, we've got our airfields that operate in that space now, have the capacity for people to cross-hire aircraft and come back and continue to operate in that controlled space. We just need to chalk that up the ladder over the next, as you said, 6, 12 months, 18 months, but it's not going to happen this year in terms of controlled airspace. Yeah.
Bunch of questions have just come in. We've now got, what are we at? Close to 70 odd people, a bit over 70, I think it is. Any prospect of VFR at night for RAAus aircraft? That comes from Ron Lawford. I think he's logged in as his wife, Annabelle. We've also got a question, I think, and it's scrolled off my screen, but I think it came in from Mark about aerobatics, Mark Sullivan, who flies an RV. There it is. What's the membership appetite for 3,000 feet or above 3,000 feet aerobatics? Subject to the introduction of appropriate medical, airframe and competency requirements. Asking for a friend. I'm sure you are, Mark, especially given your profile picture there. I hope that's not an RAAus registered aircraft because otherwise, unless you're in the Northern Hemisphere, the orientation is all wrong. The introduction of new privileges is something that I think is a fascinating question, and it's one that I can't actually answer. So what's the membership appetite? You tell me. And I think this is something where our membership needs to give us feedback. And from time to time, through these forums and whatnot, through face-to-face forums, and when we put out surveys, the board is always very interested to hear what people want. Is it additional weight? Is it additional passenger carrying privileges? Is it aerobatics? Is it night VFR? Me personally, I'd like night VFR. My aircraft that I currently fly is equipped for night VFR, but it's not aerobatic. However, Mark clearly has an appetite for aerobatics, and I know his aircraft, and that is an aerobatic aircraft. Perhaps he wants that more than night VFR. So it's a really interesting question that I think needs to be put back to the members. And I think in order to get the appropriate answer, I think we might actually pose that through a survey or something like that in the coming months. So we might try and note that down, Michael, and or one of the guys, we've got Jared and Moret in the background here. We might note that down as something we follow up.
We've had these type of questions in surveys in the past, Mick. There's light commercial operations, so photography, the sort of ag type work, fence line inspections, cattle inspections, mustering, that type of stuff, which you can do on your own property in an RAAus aircraft, but you can't do it for commercial gain. So there's a whole range of those activities that the technology has moved faster than the regulation, I suppose, in this space for RAAus. So they're things that we need to explore into the future. When we originally started the MTO and CTA ban, that was the mood of the membership at the time. So we're just following through on what the members told us 4, 5, 6 years ago, remembering that we applied for increased weight and heavier aircraft 10 or 12 years ago, before you and I were even on the scene. It was something that RAAus was chasing back then. So we're trying to stay true to what members want. It doesn't mean that we don't have a shopping list of things going forward. And I think the best way to determine what that shopping list is through our membership surveys. And we get good engagement from members. We often get about a 30% response rate from our members in that space. So, we'll note that, and we'll ask the members a question in the future on that topic.
It's also worth thinking about. We've got a workforce of 13 full-time people. That's 13, not 30. 13 people, and these people do a lot of it's the classic duck on the pond. It looks calm above the water, but below we're all paddling away frantically. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of how hard our staff work. We've got 2 staff with us tonight. 3 including Michael. I'm a volunteer, and there's a lot of people that put a lot of effort into advancing the cause of RAAus. And every time we take on something more, be it aerobatics, night VFR, passenger carrying, whatever it might be, that's just another thing that these 13 people have to do. We operate on a budget of around 3 million, give or take, compared to CASA's, which is around about 185 million. Of our 3 million, about 130 to 140 comes from the public purse via CASA grants. Most of the CASA funding, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, come from fuel excise. I worked it out once that something like 0.09% of the money raised through fuel excise makes its way into CASA, into RAAus. So that's 0.09%. Of the pilots in Australia, we account for about 17 or 18%. Of the aircraft in Australia, we're about 17 or 18%. And we account for about a third of the flying schools, yet we only get 0.09% of the public funding. It's important to note that we run a fairly lean team, a very lean team, in fact.
Very, very lean.
Yeah. We're dealing with the day-to-day operations of administering things like memberships, registration renewals, queries from people building an aircraft. I'm about to put a new aircraft on the register myself, and I know that I've been personally asking Jared a bunch of questions over the last few days. Our guys in the office, our guys and girls in the office deal with this day to day, every single day, fielding questions from almost 10,000 members and almost 3,500 aircraft owners. And every time we add another thing to the list, it just increases their workload. So there is only so much that we can get through, but I think it's important for us to hear from the members what that next thing should be and how we prioritise what we pursue in future. Alan's asked me to quickly recap about 149. He said my audio went funny for a minute there, and I've got questions scrolling off the screen. We had a slow start tonight, but it's ramped up. So just to quickly recap, Part 149 is the new regulation. Currently, we operate under a set of exemptions. The main one, not the only one, but the main one is CAO 9555. So if people Google that, you can find that. That governs the types of aircraft we can register, how they operate, refers people to the RAAus, Ops Manual and Tech Manual, and so on and so forth. Part 149, together with some other reform in the regulation, will change that, and it will create a special set of regulations. So instead of exempting us from regulations, what it does is it gives us certain regulations to operate under. One of the big differences is at the moment, CASA tells our members to operate according to our rules. What Part 149 does is change that, and it says CASA gives RAAus permission to administer a certain set of activities, and then we have a relationship with the member. And what that means, the big thing for me is that if you operate in breach of CAO 9555 or one of the others, 95, 10, 32, etc., CASA technically is the one to pursue you. Now, we've got a bit of a gentleman's agreement that we'll take care of that, but 149 formalises that and says that we get to administer certain activities and we get to manage that relationship. So they're probably the key requirements of Part 149. What it does is it strengthens our relationship with the member and gives us a bit more of a stronger role in administering our own activities and protecting our members from any sort of adverse action from CASA. Having said that, we have to respect that CASA does have the ultimate role for aviation safety, so they can inject themselves from time to time if appropriate. A question just flashed up about Holbrook. This is a really good one. We've got a heritage fund that we have. People can donate to the Heritage Fund, and indeed we can divert some of our budget to the Heritage Fund if the board sees fit to do so. Holbrook is a museum, an ultralight museum, which I think is a fantastic initiative. It's based at Holbrook, which is in southern New South Wales, and from time to time they look for money. Holbrook and other organisations like the Ultralight Museum, they can write to RAAus and they can actually request money from our Heritage Fund. We've got a process and some policies, guidelines, etc., set up to fund those things. We think it's incredibly important to protect our history and maintain a record of where we came from and some of the fantastic things that we've achieved over the years. And it's the closing comment from James is, I'm keen to do something to help. All members, when you renew your membership, or you can even ring up the office tomorrow if you like, can contribute to this Heritage Fund. I think it's an important initiative, and if you want to help, get in touch. So do you want to talk a little bit about that policy? You're probably closer to it than me, Michael.
Yeah, well, it's a policy exactly as you said, Mick. To I think it's the wording is to recognise and restore and enhance the history of ultralight aviation in Australia. And this way, at this stage, Holbrook is probably the only place doing it. They've got dozens and dozens of aircraft that the members have driven around the country and collected, and they're in storage there. Some are on display and some are in storage. And for years, they've been trying to build a museum and an exhibition space in that part of the world. So they're just sort of toing and froing now exactly where should the location be. Should it be at the actual airfield, or should it be more central to the local town centre? And they're just currently making those decisions. But as Mick said, the board has established a heritage fund. There's around $20,000, I think, in that fund now that is quarantined for designated heritage projects, and people can apply to RAAus to receive funding to assist with a specific heritage project. And that information is on our website. You can go to our website and you can search heritage or just use the menu structure to find exactly where that is. But it's a great fund that's been set up by the board, something that I know I support, and we love hearing inquiries and seeing the history of this organisation. I was at Clifton a couple of years ago and looking at some of the old original aircraft, and at Holbrook, Mick will remember that we both sat in a Scout, and Mick actually powered up a Scout and took it down the runway. And we all noticed that the fences look high when you're sitting in a Scout, I think is what Mick said at the time. So a great initiative. And if you want to support that, when you renew, designate $5, $10, $15, $20 into our heritage fund or our scholarship fund to help young people and maintainers and instructors build their skills. It is a community of members, and RAAus will match these funds to ensure that we continue to see development in that heritage space.
We've got a couple of other comments coming in. Mark Sullivan, yeah, thanks for your comment. You do amazing work, all of you. I'm proud to be a member. Rob Matthews has said something similar. There's a few of these comments, and I think it's quite sort of reassuring to hear some of these things. And I don't want to focus on the positive and ignore the negative. We need to get some critical feedback from time to time. But it is easy for us as members, and I speak as a member at the moment, to forget the hard work that the team in the office does do for us. From time to time, we tend to get feedback from members when something goes wrong. They're trying to register an aircraft, or they're trying to get an endorsement added or renew their membership or something like that. And quite often we're a little bit like the doctor. You only ever go to the doctor when you're sick. You never go when you're healthy and you're happy. And it's easy to forget some of the good work that our team in the office says. It does from time to time, and it's nice when we hear someone like Mark and Rob and whatnot say thank you. So we really do appreciate those comments, and I'm sure Michael will pass them on to the team, and I know the next opportunity that I get, I will too. So yeah, thanks Mark, thanks Rob, and thanks to the others. I think Chad just said something as well. Mark Kyle, you've just said keep 600 and under as the same, and above 600 to 760 in another class, all within RAAus. That's exactly what we've proposed with the rate increase. What we've got is different categories of aircraft. We've currently got weight shift aircraft, we've got powered parachutes, we've got 3-axis. What we're proposing to do is exactly what you've described here, Mark. We're going to have another category. So any aircraft above 600 but below 760 will go into that new category, and those aircraft will operate to a different set of rules in terms of registration requirements, airworthiness requirements, etc. Completely isolated from our current range of aircraft. We've done that for a very good reason, and I suspect this is why you've said it, Mark. We don't want to disadvantage anyone when we create a new set of rules that other people want to take advantage of. I think it's very important to protect what we've got now and not sacrifice that in order to move towards a heavier aircraft. And so we've kept that ethos in that proposal.
And that's our philosophy across the board, Mick. We never want to take away from a member. If you, as a member, still want to fill in a paper form to renew your membership, that's always going to be there. But if you want to use electronic funds transfer and log on to a members portal and do it over the internet, that's available to you as well. We had a member come in the office today and renew their membership face-to-face, as some members would choose to do. So it's always about adding add-ons, adding on layers of opportunity for a new breed of members or a different cohort of members. It's not about taking away from our existing members and recognising the scouts and the drifters and where the organisation came from. We never want to lose that, and we never want to take away from it. But we do have to move with the times, and we do have to upgrade and improve. And there are people that want to fly heavier aircraft within the organisation. So why wouldn't we provide that to them without affecting those members that don't want to change what they're currently doing? And that's an ethos that's across the organisation.
Yeah, and it's a good point. As we move to online services, we don't want to take away paper. Yeah, it's a very good point. Thanks, Michael. David Lefranc, due to COVID-19, my BFR is due this month. Have BFRs been given more time to get it done? I'm going to hand this one straight to you, Michael. I know we've been doing a lot of work in this area. I think you can tackle this. Extensions
Yeah,
to...
I haven't got the specific dates, but depending on when your BFR expired, there's a raft of extensions that CASA have issued up to 6 months. If you check our COVID web page, you'll see the dates are in there, and we've included the dates on all the work that CASA's done. So it's just dependent on which month your BFR extends. There's a 6-month extension, there's a 4-month extension, I think a 2 or 3 month extension that CASA have applied in that space. But go to that page and see. But broadly speaking, there's been a blanket 6-month extension on BFRs, on medicals, and on approval holders for CFIs, instructors, senior instructors, and things like that. There was a 6-month extension in that space as well. But all the specific detail and all the specific dates are available on our COVID-19 webpage. And if you can't find it there, call the office, give them the date of your BFR when that was due, and they can give you the expected date that you will need to do that to ensure. But right now, if your BFR was due, you're still legal to fly with RAAus right up until the 30th of June. I think the date timeline changes after 30th of June. But check the website for that, because there's a series of dates and a series of different extensions that CASA approved under our ops manual.
And again, I'll reiterate what I said before. This is an example of where CASA and our relationship with CASA has allowed us to move fairly swiftly on these things. CASA's actually been pretty good in this area in terms of granting exemptions and extensions to approvals. I know I currently hold a CASA approval as well, and it expires, as it happens, on Friday. And they've granted me extensions to that, and I didn't have to do anything to take advantage of that, essentially. In my particular case, I'm lucky. I get to renew it on the day it's due, on Friday. Yeah, for those people who can't renew, those extensions are in place. I'd also say, though, that a lot of our schools are coming back into operation now. So there's a good chance, rather than leave it to the last minute, go and get it done. The last thing I want to see is everyone leave it to the last minute and then run out of time and find that they can no longer fly because our schools are overwhelmed with people who left it to the last minute. If we think about how these things fall due, we've got about 10,000 people who hold a pilot certificate. Those pilot certificates need a BFR every second year, so that's about 5,000 every year. You can see the workload on our schools. If everyone stalls their BFR by 3 or 4 months, that creates a bit of a backlog, overwhelms our schools, and can potentially create issues and disrupt your flying. So as soon as you can get it done, I advise you to go out and get it done.
Just one of the key things you said there. Yeah, members don't need to do anything for the extensions. They're all automatic. So by all means, look at the website to see the date that it's due, but you don't actually need to do anything. We've updated the records and adjusted all the dates on our system automatically. Members don't need to do anything to access any of the extensions that CASA have issued. Yeah,
good clarification. Will there be additional requirements on instructors in the new category? We had a conversation with CASA, and CASA actually made the comment unprompted that it's really no more difficult to fly these aircraft, going from 600 kilo to 760. And I often joke when I travel overseas, that 160 kilos, as crazy as it seems, that's my baggage allowance between me and my wife when we travel. It's not much at all. We're hoping that the additional requirements, if any, are minimal, but certainly that'll be part of the conversation going forward. I'm struggling to keep up with the comments here. Will current registered aircraft be able to be registered into the higher weight class if capable, as some are, or will they only be able to remain in the current registration class, referring to the weight? Good question, Matthew. Well asked. It's if your aircraft is designed to operate at a weight above our current 600 kilos, and it fits into the new category, then you're free to shift it into that category. There may be some changes to the way that those aircraft are administered or maintained or something like that, and you need to be aware of that. But there's no reason you cannot shift your aircraft into those into that different category to take advantage of that. Certainly, LSA aircraft at the moment by the standards, are limited to 600 kilos, but any certified or amateur build, etc., that can take advantage of that, you're free to get in touch with Jared. He's our tech manager, and shift it into the new category if that's what you desire. If you don't, that is, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Thank you to Lloyd. Great information session, well articulated. It's been a long time since I've spoken to you, Lloyd, but I can see your face pop up on the screen. Good to see you, and I hope you're doing well in Tasmania. Thank you for your comments. We said before that the team, especially the team in the office, 13 people full-time, working flat out to service the members, and I agree. I think they're doing a good job behind the scenes. And in relation to these information sessions, as I said at the opening, we're going to try and keep these up even beyond COVID. They've been quite successful. We've currently got close to 80 people online at the moment, and that's more than a lot of the face-to-face sessions we get. So I think we'll try and keep this up. Bernie's just said baggage. We poor guys travel economy, Michael. I travel economy too. Unfortunately, I have to travel a lot, so they let me carry lots of bags, although I've never hit the baggage limit there, Bernie. I apologise if I've missed some of the questions, but the questions have been scrolling on my screen. As I just said, we had about 80 people at home, and I apologise if I've missed any, but we will do these sessions more. If we have missed a question, feel free to reach out to the team. We've just been talking about them. In the office, we've got a great team of people. Even through COVID-19, they're still accessible via phone, email, etc. And more than happy to answer your questions. A couple of closing comments before we wrap it up. We've got a pretty exciting event. We've come through COVID-19. RAAus has seen our workforce start to work from home, work remotely. We've started engaging in technology like this to engage with our members and stay in touch. And Paul Bennett Airshows has done the same, and they're going to be running a live stream air show on the 13th of June. They're giving free access to RAAus members. So if you log into your portal, you'll find some instructions there for the non-members amongst us. It's going to be $10 to participate in that and watch. I hear there's going to be some pretty unique views, something you wouldn't normally see from an air show. So we're normally sitting on the ground watching these guys do aerobatics, but I believe, although I hope I'm right, there's going to be some in-cockpit footage of these guys as they go through their airshow routines. So that's about 10 days' time, or exactly 10 days' time, 13th of June. Jump into your portal and take a look at that. I think it's going to be a fairly unique opportunity for us to see an airshow from the pilot's perspective, and I'm pretty keen to see what these guys do with it. So thank you to Paul Bennett and his team for bringing that to aviation in general, but especially for making their generous offer to RAAus members. I think that's a really great offer. The last thing I will leave everyone with, we've been here for about an hour, and so we might wrap it up. I'll actually just throw back to Michael before I make some closing comments and just say, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
Two things, Mick. Sport Pilot Magazine.
Yes,
hands for members, 1st of August is its first mailing day. So we need content and information by the 30th of June into RAAus. And also, if you want to receive that, you need to make sure that your name and address details and all that is up to date on your members portal. So we sent some information to members yesterday in an e-news, how they can update their details. So make sure your address is correct. And all those details are accurate, so you'll receive Sport Pilot. And of course, you do need to be a member of RAAus to receive that. So if your membership has lapsed and you haven't renewed by the 30th of June, you won't receive that first edition. We've got some measures in place for people that are struggling as a result of COVID-19. Contact our office and we can see what we can do to assist you with changing your membership cycle from 12 months maybe down to 6 months or 3 months. if that's something that will help you at this point in time. And also to help members, we've waived our reactivation fee. So we know that some members have taken a decision not to renew because of COVID-19. They haven't been flying and they're deferring their membership for a couple of months. In recognition of that, rather than charging the reactivation fee, we've waived that fee. And if you pay your flat membership fee, that will get you reactivated and reactivate all your privileges and make sure that you get the magazine and any other information that comes out. Same as the Paul Bennett Air Show. If you're not a member, you won't be able to log in and gain access to that. So we're doing what we can to lighten the load, and hopefully that's just a little bit that we can do for members to help them during these difficult times.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a good point. I'd forgotten those couple of points. I'll address one more question and one more comment that I've just noticed that I missed. The LSA, and sorry, I'll just scroll up. Alex Cosway, your GA exclusive pilot, and you were just asking if the LSA standards will ever go above 1,000 kilos. There's actually movements to do this as we speak. I think off the top of my head, I think it's they're looking at 3,600 pounds, which is about 1,600 odd kilos from memory. They're working through that in the US at the moment. An organisation called the ASTM, Australian Standards for Technical anyway, ASTM, sorry. They administer that standard, and they're working with the FAA to increase that. So I think this is a case of watch this space. I suspect over the next couple of years there will be a marked increase in the weight. They're moving towards what I mentioned before was a performance index, which is based around weight. So the weight, the power of the engine, wing loading, and so on and so forth. So there's a few characteristics they're looking at. So it's going to be a pretty big overhaul of the LSA standards, but I think it's a really, really good opportunity for manufacturers to expand their offerings and look at some different types of aircraft. And I believe they're even looking at the passenger limitations as well and increasing it from 2 seats to, I think, 4. But that one will be something that evolves over the next 2 years. Bernie just mentioned that Paul Bennett's son went solo in their RAAus aircraft, so I reckon that's pretty cool. So Paul Bennett doing aerobatics and his son just starting out in RAAus aircraft. I think it shows that we are the launching pad or the springboard for all sorts of things aviation. First opportunity for a lot of our pilots to get in the cockpit. Same with gliding, same with hang gliding and whatnot. It just proves that the sport aviation organisations offer some real opportunities, and you can go on to do some pretty impressive things. Matt Hall is another example. Started off in gliders and drifters, and went on to be the Red Bull RAAus world champion last year. So some real opportunities come up through RAAus. We might wrap it up there. I'll give you a couple of closing comments just in terms of board elections coming up. Michael's mentioned the magazine is returning in August. In that August edition, you will see we've got the board nominations. We've had 4 nominations. I'm due for re-election, plus we've got 3 others that have nominated for the upcoming election. We've had a quick look at those nominations, and there's some pretty good candidates in there. So I'd urge everyone to take a good look at the people who've nominated, consider the options, and participate in those elections. Traditionally, we get about 1 in 10 or so people vote, so about 10% of the membership actually participates in those elections. But it does really make a difference to the way that your organisation is run, and it's a big opportunity for you to basically select who takes carriage of RAAus and who looks after your rights and privileges going forward. The big things that we need on the board are not necessarily pilots and not necessarily maintainers, although we do value those skills very, very much. But our organisation is not one that flies planes. It's one that enables our members to fly planes. We don't maintain planes. We enable our members to maintain planes. What we need is some good governance skills. We need people who can interact with decision makers and people in government, CASA, air services, ATSB, etc., and influence outcomes that benefit our members. Those people tend to have skills in, as I said before, good governance. They understand the legal frameworks that we operate under. They understand the finances that we're constrained by. We've got a $3 million budget, just over $3 million in the year just gone, sorry. And these things mean that we've got to make good, sound decisions and sound choices about the things that we take on. So we talked earlier about controlled airspace and takeoff, maximum takeoff weight. We've had discussions tonight about aerobatics and night VFR and so on. We need people that can actually look at these things in the context of the legal framework we operate under, the financial constraints we've got, the technology that's available to us and so forth, and take carriage of our organisation going forward. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not going to be the chair forever. This will be my last term should I get re-elected. And we need to make sure that as we hand over the reins to the next board and the next set of directors, that we have good people that can continue the hard work of our current board and our current management over the past 5 or 6 years or so. So please take a good long look at the candidates, the information that is presented in the August magazine, and participate and have your say. It's the best opportunity for members to indicate their preference in how our organisation is run into the future. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Again, apologies if we've missed some questions. We're closing it out now with still around about 70 or 80 people. So thanks to everyone who joined in. Thanks for all the comments and questions tonight. If we have missed anything, feel free to reach out to the office, give us a call, drop us an email. We'll try and address all your questions as best we can, and stay tuned. We'll have more of these online forums as we go forward. Did you want to say anything to wrap up, Michael?
That's everything, Mick. Thank you very much. Just with the elections, there's 2 director positions up for re-election or appointment this term. So members will get to vote for 2 people, and all those instructions will be in Sport Pilot when it comes out.
Excellent. Okay, we'll wrap up there. Just before we wrap up, I want to say a big thank you. We'll get Marette and Jared on the screen. Marette and Jared are 2 of our team members behind the scenes tonight. There's Jared and there's Marette.
Thanks, guys.
These are the guys who put in the effort. It's now about 7:15 in the evening. These guys have given up their own personal time away from their families. Our staff give up a lot of time away from their families to go out to member events and whatnot. Not that that's happened lately, but as soon as we resume, you'll see these guys out in the field, engaging with members, giving up their weekends, giving up their weeknights. So thank you to Jared and Marette for sticking with us tonight. And thanks again to everyone who's dialed in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.